NFL games, what we saw was some activism from the players, and this had been boiling all offseason to the point where even during training camp, some of the teams took days off to come up with a solution within their communities. And we've seen plans released from different teams, the Minnesota Vikings, the Baltimore Ravens, plenty more of how they want to be engaged in the community. But we saw plenty of signs of unity and demonstrations from the players, whether it was the Indianapolis Colts all locking arms and Frank Reich kneeling on the 50-yard line, whether it was some of the other teams just being right there surrounding each other, letting guys have the decision of whether to kneel or whether to stand, and being unified in that, which were very positive images. And then we had the one that I think is the elephant in the room, a little bit of negativity there on the Thursday night game between the Chiefs and the Texans, where they all met and they linked arms for a moment of silence for unity that was met with boos from the crowd. And I remember back to my playing days, 2016 and 2017. 2016 specifically, that's when Cap was really kneeling. 2017 was where things got contentious politically, that warranted a response. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks into the season by a lot of teams. And a lot of that conversation revolved around the national anthem. And a lot of us were saying that we have respect for the national anthem, for America, for veterans, et cetera. And a lot of people didn't want to hear that message. And specifically that Thursday night demonstration had nothing to do with the national anthem and was still met with boos. And so the question becomes, what do these players do to get people to start listening? KB, I'd like to hear some of your thoughts.
Well, I think most importantly is that we start to realize that more people are listening. So I think one of the biggest things I've taken away from my professional career in sports is the boo birds, the naysayers are usually the loudest, but they're usually the minority, right? JP, I think you know that as well. Going to like the university that you did, you deal with fans and people that necessarily don't support everything that you do, but they're going to cheer for you because you're in uniform. Once you take that uniform off and you start to realize I'm a human being, and I have values for certain things, some people aren't always going to agree with that. And that's exactly what we're seeing with that kind of behavior with the booing. So you said it perfectly, that I feel like the message has always been clear as far as what was being protested, right? It was police brutality and social injustice towards communities of color. At no point was it ever about the disrespect of the troops or the flag or anything like that. But in some way that message was lost. I'm not going to, throw stones at who was responsible, right? That's not for me to debate. But I do believe that there has been an awakening and people are starting to listen. If you see these platforms in the NBA and the NFL, and we're taking these moments and we're having these conversations. So that's the change. That's the positivity that I'd love to focus on. In a pessimistic view, there's always going to be people that aren't going to agree with that, right? There's going to be racists. There's going to be bigots. It's our responsibility to educate those that are willing to learn and willing to have the conversation, and not draw the line in the sand that we're seeing so typical in our culture in this polarizing time, if you will, because it's tough to make decisions with a sound mind and conscious when you have so many influences pulling you so many directions.
No, and I agree with that. And I think your point of the positivity aspect, right? Because we had that one event and it kind of stands out to us. But I'd love to point out, like you said, some of the positives. So we heard the boos, but in that crowd, you could hear lots of applause and lots of cheering as well. And that shows that there were plenty of people who were supportive of that. And I think most people are. And the other thing, like I had iterated earlier, is a lot of these teams were unified, and they showed that maybe not everybody has to do the same thing. Maybe not everybody has to have they don't have to be on the same page in terms of what's a demonstration and how they want to do it, but supporting the cause and standing behind your teammates that want to be out in front. And we're all kind of teammates in life here. So it's really, football is an analogy for the rest of life. I think that we're starting to see a lot of folks who are supporting and amplifying different voices and really standing behind people, even if it's not necessarily their battle to fight, which I think is fantastic. So it was a really heavy weekend. And I think even more so with the empty stadiums, there was a lot of spotlight, because typically we would see the flag flying and we would see them panning the stadium. You know, they look from sideline to sideline, obviously, but we would get a shot of the fans, and that just wasn't there. And so there was a real spotlight. But through that, I think that we are going to see a lot of change. There being a lot of dollars that are flowing into the communities from these teams. A lot of players are putting their own dollars up as well. And really a society right now that's in a little bit of a different place than we were 4 or 5 years ago, where we're willing to listen, like you said. So I think it's exciting. We won't let any negative events get in the way of the challenges that we face day to day in this fight for justice. And as long as we can all stay aligned and support one another, even if we all aren't necessarily on the same page, I think that's where we find that true progress.
Right. I mean, you said it great. Change is change slow, always has been, always will be. But the fact that we're having these conversations and starting to empathize with one another a bit, that is certainly encouraging, and that's what you want to see out of these type of situations.